This is based on a book by Sarah Fordham, The House of Gucci. It was brought to my attention, funnily enough, by my wife, who's a producer, has done several things, not with me. So this would be the first thing I've ever done with Janina. And she said, this is a really interesting story. And that was 20 years ago. So in the 20 years, we've been trying to get it written where you have the balance of what actually happened with the personal side of the story, which is constantly offset against the evolution of the business. And so it was an interesting thing of a family history, a grand family history, almost Italian royalty in the fashion industry, and which led to destruction of the family. I used to buy my mother little Gucci presents every Christmas. And so I knew a lot about the Gucci evolution as a product, as a franchise. And so I didn't have to do much research. I've been right through that. I lived through everything in the 60s. I was at the Royal Court of Art in the 60s. There's no one better than the Royal Court of Art in the 60s, trust me. So I'd been through it. And so the next step is to bring my designers to bear to it, which will be Janti, which is the clothing, and then the production designer, Arthur Max, where we can both identify the places and the time and what they might be. And, of course, what the fashion would be, because that becomes very important, and I think has taken quite an important part in the film. I think Janti got it really well done, and even though we looked at early Gucci stuff, and it was really impressive. The early Gucci stuff was very impressive. It's a young woman who is looking for a guy to marry. And I don't want to paint it in a misleading way, but she was certainly a girl about town who would enjoy her nightclubs and that thing, but she still lived with her parents at home. One day she met a man at a club who called himself MAURIZIO. She had no idea who this was, other than the fact he was extraordinarily polite, which she was not used to. Men aren't necessarily polite with girls in nightclubs and things like that. So she was impressive. She was impressed by him. This leads to, of course, her finding out who he is. And the Gucci in those days family would be just one step above or below royalty in Italy. So she suddenly realized how important he was, and I think she really went after him. You watch that evolution into, and I believe, if you're going to be very simplistic about it, it was love at first sight. I started to be very curious about Stefania, particularly when I saw A Star is Born, and I thought there's more here than her talent, a formidable talent as an entertainer and as a singer, as a producer and a writer of her own show. This is a real engine of creativity. And so I met with her, and she came to the office, and I liked her immediately, and she was fascinated immediately, and that's how it began. Sometimes a singer can also be a natural actor or actress, because that's what they do on stage when they're singing. They're so inside their own words as she writes them. So she's writing her own play, which she then sings. So in a funny kind of way, it's not a stone's throw, less than a stone's throw away from, if you're getting a script, can you just act and not sing? And so that became very apparent that she was very superlatively prepared for every line, more than normal in the whole story. So she didn't miss a beat on a line. What the hell, let's just give Roberto a go. And within about 6 weeks, I was reading this on a Saturday morning thinking, holy shit, he nailed it. And that's how it happened. So it was all Roberto's doing in terms of how he saw it. Adam Driver is a rare breed. He's one of the best in the business right now. And they come and go and they evolve and settle down or evolve and keep getting better. And Adam has evolved for a while now and it just keeps getting better. So I went from medieval, where I think I got on quite well with him. I think he was shocked at the speed I worked. And what's interesting is he liked it. I think Maurizio was a very sheltered child, and then youth, and then as a young man was overtly protected by Rodolfo, his father. Rodolfo, Jeremy Irons, is older than Al. Al is the slightly flash Harry of the Brotherhood who goes to New York and sets up in fact sets up the empire, the beginning of the empire. Rodolfo stays in Milan and Rome, mostly Milan, where he's happy and content with his very posh, high-end business. And I think he secretly never wanted to be a shopkeeper. He calls himself, I'm a shopkeeper. What he wanted to be was an actor. And he had been a film actor where he'd married a star in the 20s who was a German actress who had become a star in Italy, and where he fell deeply in love with her at a very young age, and she died of cancer at a very young age. So it's as if she was, engraved forever in that beautiful woman. So the sadness was he would watch all the films with her night after night. With Maurizio, you're already starting off with a teen young man who's getting damaged by his father's almost manic obsessive thing with the past. And that's where we begin. And Maurizio, the father, wants to be a lawyer. He doesn't want to be in the business. Maurizio does not want the business because he can see the business has kind of affected his father in a rather chronic fashion. His father never wanted to be the shopkeeper. He wanted to be the actor. So he sees a father who is only filled with regret. And that's where it starts. Patricia, by the time she's 22, 23, is a girl about town for sure. And I don't want to say more than that because I don't know, but she certainly was an experienced woman, young woman, and had boyfriends, and none of them quite fitted the bill. And I think when she came across Maurizio, there was a freshness to him that I think endeared her to him, and so she became very impressed with him. But she knew it was the Gucci. It was like she really wanted to be part of his life. How do I cast the two brothers? I'll have wanted to work with forever and ever and ever, because without question he's a goddamn icon. And I'd worked with Jeremy before. I did Kingdom of Heaven with Jeremy, who played one of the powerhouses in Jerusalem at the time of Saladin. And so I was familiar with Jeremy's elegance, and I wanted the brother to be superlatively elegant and happy to live as a gentleman shopkeeper. He would never hit me if I said he was a shopkeeper, but Gucci as a shop. It's a shop. It sells clothing. It's a fashion house, is the better way of putting it. I don't think he thought about that. He thought it was a way, because in those days, they'd be selling leather goods, handbags, luggage, etc., etc. They hadn't quite shifted gear to the fashion house. Aldo was of the other school, slightly younger, was a bad boy about town, loved the women, and was a constant playboy, but at the same time was evolving the business in a quite different way than his brother in Milan. So that was chalk and cheese. They're quite different. Al comes off piste when you're writing, you've written something, you got the scene flying, and he loves to ad lib. So he comes off the ski slope and he'll ad lib on the side. But what's happening is you're getting rosebuds falling from his mouth every 2 or 3 seconds, so you let him run. And then sometimes if he goes on a bit, I'll say, come back on. So you then suddenly come back on the scene, complete and finished, so that I can look at it after and say, oh my God, I got it. So it's a cherry picking, it's a rose picking thing of saying, that's marvelous and that's marvelous. So he's a great ad libist. But you can't let him go on too long. You've got to come back on the story. That to me was one of my best experiences. Because Al, considering who he is a bit of a tour de force in American cinema and theatre. That he was the nicest man who could easily have been difficult. But I don't tolerate difficult anymore because I don't have to either. But I got on great with him. Paolo is written in a very amusing fashion. It's nearly satire. In fact, I think a lot of this, I was pushing this film slightly in the direction of being satirical. And it certainly is between the father, Aldo, and Paolo. And I always liked the idea that Paolo's an idiot, but I put the line in, my son's an idiot. Paolo's an idiot, but he's my idiot. So, however, the shortfall on Paolo was Aldo would always love him as a son, even having put him in prison. Right? I like that. I love that connection. So it means Aldo's a good man. We had some research material, and Paolo looked just like that. I said, how are you going to do this? He said, well, makeup. I said, that's the hardest makeup to do, to put it on from here to here. So you're doing that, and you're going to get creases. It's the hardest single thing to do. We found a genius in Scandinavia who we were able to have this done every morning. He was there at 4:30 a.m. with a 4-hour makeup thing. He arrived on the set looking, okay, let's go. And there he was, and he was a completely different person. Maurizio is really smart. But Maurizio is very defensive and fragile because he doesn't like to be pushed around and be put in the place where he doesn't want to be. And his father wants that for him all the time. And that's where it drives them apart. Paolo was had completely overestimated his talent as a designer. And in fact wasn't much of as a fashion designer in the way that fashion was going at that particular moment. So in other words, he was slightly out of fashion, and even the clothes he wore are very OTT, over the top. And so the family were always slightly embarrassed about him wanting to be part of the Gucci thing and design clothing for Gucci, because they couldn't have that under the Gucci label. Hina was an actual TV late night, I'll tell you a fortune person in Italy at the time. So what we did was literally what she was, what you see, what you simply copied her setup on television. That's what she did. And she would talk to the audience at night saying, pick up the phone, call me now, and I'll tell you where you're going. I'll read your fortune. I won't necessarily tell you, you won't necessarily hear good news, but I'm going to tell you what I think the truth is. And off that impressed Patricia. But Patricia wasn't hoping anything. She was just, I think she was just, the way I did it was, she was sitting there one night, sitting in the kitchen, and can't sleep because of various things. And maybe he's already starting to get anxious about the relationship. And already stepping further than she should be. And seeing Pina on television and going, let's start talks to him. And it's random. The random thing starts to evolve. And so I've known Salma for a number of years, and I thought, I asked her, would you do this small part? But I'd love to have you do it. And she did. She can then admire richness that she hasn't got and want to be sophisticated. She wants part of that. But she feels she may never have that because if she aware of the fact she doesn't have that kind of class. So she's reaching for the class that she might not ever attain. In many respects, she didn't, even though she was adored by a lot of people because she was such a she was a bit of a showstopper when she was younger. So she looked good on his arm. So he felt good by having her on his arm. And don't forget, he was probably very much in love with her. I met Darius. I know him through my eldest son. And he was great. And Darius can cope with any number of cameras. He just flies with the ball. And so we're a very, very efficient team. And it all looks beautiful. Arthur and I have known each other, God, 35, 40 years. And I started by doing Pepsi Cola commercials. Arthur's a new boy on the block, and I've now already got a company that's my company's 54 years old. Arthur, 54 years. I formed it when I was 27. And so Arthur Max Kim, he's from a guy from America saying, hey, I need to do, I said, okay, we'll try him out. He was good. But I always had 2 or 3 really good designers working with me because I was a good designer, so I know it. And Arthur gradually evolved into doing lots of the big ones. And then we just stayed together on the big ones because as I'm coming out of one, I'm already prepping another one.